Joining us now, former governor of Virginia, Jim Gilmore. He also is the chairman of Team Virginia 2016, trying to win the state for Donald Trump. He's also endorsed Donald Trump about a week ago, so he's fired up about that, fired up about the debate, and it's good to have him with us. Governor, thanks for your patience today. Thank you so much.
Good morning, John. Glad to have a chance to be on your show.
Look, Governor, I got to get right to this Washington Post story yesterday. You're a former governor, Doug Wilder, former governor, the first black governor in Virginia, got elected in 1990. And Wilder yesterday blasting the Clinton campaign, saying that they have taken black voters for granted. And that he said, when I ran for governor in 1990, he said, I never mentioned my opponent's name one time. I told the voters of Virginia what I was going to do as governor, what my plan was. And that's all I talked about. I never mentioned his name. And he said, all Clinton does is bash Trump. Nobody has any idea what she's standing for. He also goes on to say that she's taking blacks for granted and that he commended Trump for going into black communities and at least making the attempt at a dialogue. And he cited a number of people who have told him in the black community they are voting for Trump because, as Trump says, what do you have to lose? So, and a stunning story yesterday on Doug Wilder in the Washington Post of all places. I know you know the former governor well. What do you make of this?
Well, I know Doug Wilder very well, my predecessor in the governor's office, and he and I are friends. He actually did some things that would help me a great deal when I ran for governor, but that was because I was doing a significant outreach into the African American community in the same way that I think Donald Trump is right now. And I think that it's perfectly clear that Hillary Clinton's program and policies are not only not good for the African American community, they're not good for any community. Their approach, when she deigns to speak about policy, she really talks about transferring money from one person to another, whereas Donald Trump's program is economic growth and giving more jobs and more opportunities and more churning of the economy, so there's more wealth being created. It's perfectly clear that Hillary Clinton and her party right now are the enemies of wealth, and I think that's why Doug Wilder is out there right now beginning to blow the whistle on this Clinton campaign and say that it's time for a change and it's time for Donald Trump.
Well, it's amazing. He said yesterday, he really blasted the Clinton campaign. He said, putting out what he said is no positive vision or blueprint for where America's going. He said the whole campaign is just based on Trump is bad. And he said, you can't win that way. I had a call. I want to get your thoughts on this. I had a caller yesterday. I thought it was very interesting. He was comparing the 2016 Virginia campaign, Trump Clinton, to 2005, Jerry Kilgore, Tim Kaine. And he said he worked on the Kilgore campaign and they went around Virginia and all they did was say, Tim Kaine, too liberal for Virginia, going to take your guns away, obscure mayor, can't trust him. And he said Kilgore never outlined a vision for what he would do as governor. And he said all of a sudden in October, they were up by 15. He said all of a sudden they got their clock cleaned. And he said he sees the same thing coming. Do you draw a parallel to that?
I think that the parallel that you're drawing that I want to point to is that it's necessary to really offer the people of Virginia something positive and a vision for the future without regard to race or gender or any of these things. You've got to actually come forward with good ideas for people so that they can look up to their kids in the morning and say, yes, I'm going to vote for a better future for them. And, the stagnation of the economy has been a really serious problem for everywhere, and including Hampton Roads, and there needs to be a change. Donald Trump offers that change in terms of economic policy and also in national security, which I think people care about a lot. In the Hampton Roads area, there are a lot of military families there, a lot of veterans there, and I think they recognize the extreme danger that the United States is getting into as a result of the Obama-Clinton foreign policy over the last 8 years. And it's time for some strong, decisive leadership, not to create a war, but to prevent a war. The time has come for a change, and I think that that's really what we're talking about. I wouldn't look back necessarily on the Virginia race other than to say that you have to offer a positive vision in Virginia. By the way, the Virginia polls are tightening, as you can see, and that's because I think that Trump has put out a program, and Hillary Clinton is just, frankly, just yelling.
Well, she is. What do you look for in Monday's debate? Now, you participated in several of these Republican debates, Governor Gilmore, not with Trump, but with several other pretty accomplished foes up there. What does Trump have to do Monday night?
Well, I did get a chance to get into two of the debates, and I would like to have gotten in all the debates.
Right.
But who knows what would have happened? But I didn't. But when the debates I did get into, I think were quite successful because I think that you have to. What I was trying to do in the debates was to look for moments when my opponents wanted to do things that I don't think are good, that were something different, and then to highlight those things. And I think the debate stage gives you that opportunity to do that. You can put forward your own ideas, but just criticizing the other guy or gal is not going to be appropriate. It's an opportunity to contrast so that the viewer knows what you want to do as opposed to what they want to do.
So, look, I thought you cleaned everybody's clock in both the first and the second debate. I know people had said that Fiorina won the first debate. I couldn't believe I was reading that. I called you the winner in both debates. So a lot of people thinking now what Trump has to do Monday night is appear calm, collected, controlled, and kind of do what John Kennedy did in 1960. People were concerned about his age and maybe he didn't have the maturity and he didn't have the knowledge. But when the debate was over, people could envision him as being their president. He seemed to have a handle on things. He didn't get rattled, and he was able to go on and beat Richard Nixon in 1960. Do you subscribe to the same thing for Trump? Does he have to just appear presidential and debate her to a draw, or does he have to beat her decisively? What do you think, sir?
Well, I think that the Clinton candidacy is not doing well right now. If you look at what's going on, Trump is now ahead in Florida. He's ahead in Georgia. There was some loose talk about how Clinton might carry Georgia. That's not going to happen.
No way.
And things are moving forward in Virginia, and that's because the Republicans are coming home. So I think that if they see him in the debate stage and, he draws those contrasts, I don't think that he has to be dull. JFK was not dull in his debate. What he did was he drew a contrast with Nixon, particularly on foreign policy issues. Right. Now, as it turns out, of course, that nothing he was saying was true, but it didn't matter. What mattered was he did talk substance, and he did talk about material things, and I think it made a big difference in the debate. And I think Monday, you've got to remember that Trump's moving forward, and we're just beginning the last phase of this campaign here in the fall right now. So I'm very optimistic.
Well, he's got all the momentum. Look, there's no question about it. Governor, I want to get to the little foreign policy here for a second. Wait, I tell you what. Let's keep that as a sidebar for a second. Let's get to the recent polls that just came out. You ran for governor, you ran for Senate, you ran for president, you get polls. Two polls come out in the same day. One, the Rasmussen poll, which I'm a believer in because I think you look at their track record, they're pretty accurate. They show Trump with a 5-point lead nationally, right? The day before that, the NBC poll comes out, and they show Clinton with a 6-point lead. Governor, that's an 11-point differential. I mean, you're either up 6 or you're down 5. It's not like one had him up by 2, the other down by 1. It's this 11-point differential. How can these polls be so diverse to each other?
Well, because I guess a different methodology, or perhaps the national people are trying to manipulate things in order to persuade Trump people that they shouldn't go to the polls.
Right.
But I think that the trends that we're seeing nationwide are unmistakable, and that is a variety of polls. If you look at all the polls, you're seeing a move by the Trump campaign forward. But it's not because of any small detail or anything like that. I think it's because the people are ready for a change, and they know that if they hit status quo and for the next 8 years, people are going to continue to be poor and not have opportunities. And this particularly goes in the African-American community. I think the African-American community wants opportunities. They want chances to advance. And they know right now we're in a stagnant economy because of the policies of the Democratic Party. And the Clinton campaign and Hillary Clinton has made it clear there's not going to be any change under her. Mm-hmm. She's going to keep on doing things that are going to tamp down the economy and reduce jobs. And that's just not the future for the United States.
Let's get to foreign policy. The very sensitive, touchy ceasefire between the government of Syria and the rebels lasted, a day? It broke down Everybody kind of expected that was going to happen. Look, we have no clear policy there. Trump has called for a safe zone for refugees in part of Syria that the Gulf states would pay for. What do you make of that?
I don't know how you actually effectuate that, John, but I think that Donald Trump will illuminate some of that on Monday night when he starts talking about the foreign policy. But let's remember that it's under Obama Clinton that the Syrian thing has deteriorated so much and called for things like a no-fly zone. But I will tell you that it will require America to lay the foundation of strength and to tell the Russians that they simply cannot continue to control the air over Syria on behalf of the Assad government. This is a very dangerous time, a very difficult situation when you look at not only Syria, but Iraq and everything else that's going on in the country, the danger of the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians that are very much influencing the situation in Syria. It's clear that the international situation is deteriorating under the Obama-Clinton foreign policy. And it's time not for a war, but for strong American leadership, which demonstrates that we have the capacity to use force if necessary, not to create a war. I don't want to do that, and I don't think Trump does either. But we want to instead prevent a war, and weakness calls for war. That's what happens, and that's where we are right now. I'm very worried about it.
Governor, staying with foreign policy, we see now that the Russians are amassing a pretty big troop presence on the Ukrainian border right now as we speak. Troops going there and armaments going there. Normally, you send troops to a border of a country. There's some kind of a military objective. What do you think they're up to?
I think that the Russians have decided to try to reassemble their empire. This is very dangerous. I take the position, and I'm sure Donald Trump does, that the Crimea conquest cannot stand. If you have a situation in the 21st century where a country can simply invade another country and annex its territory by force, then at that point anything goes. The Baltic states are in jeopardy. NATO is in jeopardy. The Eastern European countries that used to be under the Russian heel are in jeopardy. And that means that Europe becomes a flashpoint once again in the international stage. So I believe, first of all, I applaud the president for putting troops into the Baltic countries. I think that was a very key thing to do. And I think that we have to pay more attention to the Ukrainian situation. If Ukraine remains free and intact, and we establish the principle that the Russians have to play by the international civilized nation rules, then I think we can keep the peace in Europe. And frankly, the Russians ought to be participating on the world stage and the economy much more in trying to help their people improve their quality of life. And instead, what we're seeing is a dangerous program and campaign of conquest that can only lead to suffering for everybody in Europe and everybody in Russia.
Ukraine is not an ally of the United States in the fact that there's no treaty. They're not a member of NATO. They're a sovereign country. Why would we be meddling in that? Why wouldn't that be solved by the East Europeans? Why does the U.S. have to get involved in worldwide conflicts, stick our hose in it, risk lives where we have nothing at stake?
Well, you always have to evaluate whether you have something at stake or not. The Europe of today, with a free Eastern Europe, including places like Poland, Hungary, Romania, and frankly, a Ukraine that is at least liberated from the Russian heel, is better for the United States of America. We have global interests. We have to be concerned about the Pacific. We have to be concerned about Europe. American national interest means that we have the capacity to move in both Europe and also in the Pacific. And that's the nature of protecting the American people. So the question is not so much Ukraine. The question is, are the Russians, in fact, trying to reestablish their empire, which is not in the American national interest?
Okay, but what business do we have in meddling in Ukrainian Russo affairs? That's my question. I'm going to give you the final word. You have a minute.
Well, in the last minute, it is the fact that the United States and the world are benefited if democracy is in fact advanced in places that are near other democracies. Not to go to war or to do a conquest, but where people are free, America is better off. And the Russians, I think, on the other hand, they don't see it that way. They see Russian dominance as the right answer. very dangerous program for Europe. But we have a lot to think about. I've devoted a lot of my time in life to thinking about these foreign policy issues.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what is needed right now is strength at the national level, and I think Donald Trump is offering that, whereas the Clinton administration has demonstrably proved that their policy of passivity and weakness is inherently dangerous. And that's why we're facing this problem in the Ukraine in the first place.
All right, that is going to be the final word. Former Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore, Republican, now chairman of 2016 Team Virginia. His job carrying Virginia for Republicans and for Trump in 2016, and it's getting closer. Governor, thank you. Now,
John, you got a great program. I appreciate your leadership on these thought areas.
Thank you, Governor. It's always a pleasure to have you on and get your thoughts and insight. Real honor.